Welcome to City Watch, a watchdog program for social, economic, political, and cultural issues here in New York City. I'm your host for today, Jeff Simmons. The culture of New York City is reflected in its size and ethnic diversity. Many cultural movements first emerged here, fueled by immigrant populations that emigrated to America and influenced dance, music, and the arts. It's often said that New York City is an epicenter for a diversity of music, film, dance, and visual arts. The city's Department of Cultural Affairs is the largest public funder of the arts in the country, and its budget is even larger than that of the National Endowment for the Arts. The DCLA, in fact, funds and supports more than 1,400 arts and cultural organizations in our 5 boroughs, including 375 museums, close to 100 orchestras, as well as a performing arts center, botanical gardens, zoos, and an aquarium, which many of you probably have visited. As the city noted in its Create NYC cultural plan, the city's cultural world gives us a tremendous amount to celebrate. So today on City Watch, we're going to talk about culture and the arts with our guests. We're going to start off with New York City Council member Francisco Moya, who represents the 21st City Council District, which spans East Elmhurst, Corona, and Lefrak. Francisco previously had served as a state assembly member, and that earned him, when he was elected in 2010, earned him the distinction of becoming the city's first Ecuadorian American elected to public office in the country. And during his tenure as an elected, he's championed causes supportive of working class families, fought to improve workplace safety, and spotlighted the construction death epidemic. Now, in addition at the City Council to serving as the chair of the Subcommittee on Zoning and Franchise, he's also on the Council's Committee on Cultural Affairs, Library, and International Intergroup Relations. Francisco, welcome to City Watch.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
So today we're focusing on culture in the city, and I'm going to get to a few other issues I'd like to talk to you about. But first, let's talk a little about culture. What type of issues does your committee focus on?
Well, look, I think it's a lot of issues that we look at is funding for the arts. Our libraries are critical. We just recently had a hearing through the budgetary process to bring in the libraries to talk about a lot of their needs and wants. We know that libraries are just extremely critical in our communities, especially communities of color. Programs that exist there, such as adult literacy, programs that can teach English language learners the ability to have access to English classes, immigration courses as well, but even to the simplest of things of an initiative that was started recently, where there's video conferencing for families, where a family member may be incarcerated. They have access to go to the libraries and do video conferencing as well. It's a promotion that we need to continue to push for and fight for as we go through this process, because New York City is filled with a lot of great cultural institutions, and we want to make sure that our communities are able to be serviced by them.
And you mentioned the recent hearing, and I guess it was about that day or that time you had tweeted, I recall, that libraries are public cathedrals. Can you talk a little about that and their importance?
Yes, of course. And I meant that because growing up in Corona, Queens, you see that the Corona Library, the Jackson Heights Library, East Elmhurst, they're busting at the seams. And people from all ages come to utilize our libraries. And when we don't have significant funding for them, it is our obligation to go and fight for that. And also to, hold the administration accountable to ensure that we can get 7-day libraries to be open 7 days, to make sure that the programs are needed and expansion is given. One of the programs that I have won recently was a program that gave access to individuals to get Wi-Fi hotspots that they can take home. We know in our communities there is a serious lack of access to the Internet, and where kids can only get access to Wi-Fi, whether it's in their schools or the libraries, we want them to be able to have that at home. We know that adults come and use the libraries as well to do research, to apply for employment. Our seniors this is a great resource for them when they can go and have a quiet place to read and study. We want to make libraries extremely accessible and a priority in how we move this city.
And you mentioned that some of the libraries that you have visited, you've seen, as I have too, one of Jackson Heights that you had mentioned, that is bursting at the seams. There's always constant engagement. There, at any point when I visited my local branch, I noticed how the diversity of people and the age range, from the youngest to the oldest who are using this. So as you think of these challenges that many of the institutions are facing, and we're now in budget season, what are some of the challenges and the opportunities ahead, and what are some of your considerations as you consider any type of budgetary allotments?
Well, look, I think one, we need to make sure that if there is that we have enough capital funding in our budget to expand our local libraries and see about making additions to libraries that are much needed. $25 million has been allotted to Corona Library now to start its expansion, and it's much needed, and we think that we can accomplish that in a short period of time, which I think is a great thing. But we have to do that citywide, and I think we also have to make sure that we are employing the right number of people in our libraries to keep the libraries going. They are short-staffed with a shoestring budget. That has to be made a priority so that we can keep our libraries functioning, and the workers that are there that are from the community can keep operating in a way that can take in the additional flow of people that keep coming in, especially in rich and diverse communities like the one I represent. I think it's important that we also continue to focus on the programs that matter. When we can get programs for adult literacy, that's crucial in our communities. And one of the reasons why these hearings are so important is because not only do we get to hear from the folks that represent our libraries, but from everyday New Yorkers who come out here and can talk about the needs and the struggles that they see. And that's critical for us as we go through this budgetary process, is to hear from New Yorkers to see what they want to see happen as we move forward in keeping our funding stream going for our libraries, which I think should be one of our top priorities this year.
So since I have you today, I'd like to just ask about a few other issues that have been in the news. I know that you've led the efforts to improve safety of construction workers at construction sites. Can you talk a little about the measures that you've advanced?
Sure. I mean, look, when we've had 69 deaths in a little over 2 years in the city of New York, most of these construction workers are Black and Latinos that are dying at astronomical rates. We need to ensure that we are protecting the safety of our workers. That the New York skyline should not be built on the blood, but on the sweat of the workers that build these buildings. And for me, coming from a immigrant family, most of the individuals that are on these construction sites are immigrant workers. They're day laborers. They're being contracted by unscrupulous developers who put profit over the lives of the individuals that they hire. And so for me, it's been critical to really uphold and continue to talk about strengthening the scaffold law, the only law that we have on record that would actually truly protect any injured worker on a construction site. But also I championed Carlos's law. And Carlos's law was based on a young 20-year-old Ecuadorian immigrant from Corona, Queens, who was on a job site. His name was Carlos Moncayo, and he wound up dying on a construction site in Manhattan. The Department of Buildings had gone to the site early in the morning, had closed it down. The foreman and the contractor told him to get into this pit where they knew it was very dangerous for him, that had no safety beams for them to go and do the digging, and they send them in 10 minutes. The walls collapsed and the ground collapsed on him. He died almost instantly. It was the first time that there was an arrest in a case like this, and what had passed in the assembly was to strengthen the ability for prosecutors to go after not only developers but contractors who are skirting the law. It would raise it to a Class D and E felony and raise the amount of money that they would get penalized. That would be up to anywhere between $300,000 to $1 million, depending on what their findings were. Because now it's really just a slap on the wrist. If someone dies on a construction site, the most that people are getting fined is about $10,000. And a lot of these unscrupulous contractors look at that as the price of doing business in the city of New York. We have to end this. If there was 66 teachers or 66 nurses that were dying, people would be having hearings on this. But because people think that construction work is dangerous, that it's par for the course, and we need to start changing that. And that's one of the reasons why I have been championing this issue for a number of years and want to continue seeing that as we develop this city. It, as I said, should not be built on the blood, but it should be built on the sweat of these construction workers that have families and go out there every day.
And you noted that many of the construction workers are immigrants, so I'd like to just get your sense, if you could read the tea leaves, what do you think the chances are of driver's licenses for immigrants passing in the state?
Well, I would have hoped it's another bill that I carried. As you know, Jeff, I was the lead author of the New York State DREAM Act, and I also had the driver's license bill. Right now it's being championed by a very good friend, Marcos Crespo, who's doing a tremendous job. But I think it's time for the governor really to step up when it comes to these issues that he has for many years said he supported but couldn't get it because there was no support in the Senate chamber. Now that has changed, we know that this makes sense. It will really provide for immigrants that are working here that will no longer have to live in the shadows. It doesn't make it dangerous for them to be driving and for anyone else who could possibly get injured from this. I think that there is a movement that has been coming on for a number of years, not just in the city of New York, but even in upstate New York, where there's a lot of farm workers who rely on driving to get to and from work. I think that this is an important time for New York to really begin to start leading the way again on some of these very progressive issues. We've seen that because of the anti-immigrant sentiment that is coming from the White House, it has forced states to really start looking at different laws to protect our immigrant community who have been providing to the economy for a number of years. I think that this is the moment in which I think people need to unite behind an issue that will actually benefit all New Yorkers when we can get driver's licenses for all passed.
And the Dreamer, we've got about a minute or two left. So the Dreamer legislation, now, if I'm correct, that was passed on a state level, but it's still sitting on the governor's desk. Is that right?
Correct.
Any sense on why, this is not moving forward if we already have the approval of both bodies?
Well, look, I think that some of this, or from what I've been told, is they're waiting to pass it. Also, they're waiting for the state budget to pass because it has a fiscal note to it. Once that passes, there'll be a bill signing, is what I've been told. I would hope that is the reason why. I think the efforts that have been made from a lot of these young dreamers that had come up to Albany for more than 8 years now. It is a momentous day for them, but also for the state of New York. And we hope that the governor will sign it once this budget is passed, and we can really begin to start working towards these young immigrant students going and getting a good quality education here in the state of New York, and being able to contribute back when they become a productive part of our society in the future.
Francisco Moya, thank you so much for joining us today. How can people find out more about your work and your office?
Great. And also before I leave, I want to wish everyone a happy St. Paddy's Day. We are all Irish today. But if you want to reach me, you can reach me at on social media. You can reach me at Francisco Moya NY on my Twitter handle, Facebook, and Instagram. And always feel free to give us a call at the office. We are at 718-651-1917. And I want to just thank you, Jeff, for the opportunity to come on your show and talk about some of the issues that you and I both care about. And hopefully I'll see you back at the Hood.
I'll definitely see you there. City Councilman Francisco Moya, thanks for joining me here today on BAI. So today the focus largely is on arts and culture. So I just want to read you a quote from Georgia O'Keeffe as we lead into our next guest. "One can't paint New York as it is, but rather as it is felt." So I want you, as you're listening to the show today and listening to our guests, to think about how the arts and culture and the diversity of it in our city makes you feel, and about the institutions you regularly might pass by but not think to go inside. Maybe you'll think twice now. This brings us to our next guest, Eduardo Beato, the artistic director and CEO of Ballet Hispanico, our country's leading Latino dance organization, which has been bringing individuals and communities together to celebrate and explore Latino cultures through dance for nearly a half century. Welcome to City Watch, Eduardo.
Thank you, Jim. It's wonderful to be with you.
So tell me a little about the history of Ballet Hispanico.
Well, Ballet Hispanico was founded in 1970 by Tina Ramirez, a performer, choreographer, and educator who wanted to give access to quality arts training and education, and also to give access to the rest of the world to enjoy the amazing cultures of the Hispanic diaspora through dance.
Now go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. So since its inception, we've been doing all of that, celebrating the joy and the passion of the diverse Latinx cultures in our world today.
So now you've been with Ballet Hispanico for a decade now and CEO since 2015. How have audiences changed over time?
Well, I have to tell you that I've been associated with the organization for over 25 years. I was a performer. I was a dancer with the company back let's say the 80s. And now it's been a decade that I've been the artistic director. And certainly since when I was a dancer to now, the audiences have changed. It is a more diverse audience. It is an audience that's still, New York City, it's the capital of the arts of the world. And so our audiences have remained the same in some senses because they are an audience that is sophisticated about what they're seeing. They're open. They're, willing to take risks with the arts and with the artists that are presented. But I have seen a change. We certainly have been really working on bringing more of our Latinx community, our younger Latinx community members into our performances. And I think we've been we've done well. And so I am seeing that shift in our audiences.
And, what's interesting is I want to point out, you're not in any one location, that you present in a number of locations.
Correct. So we have a touring, the professional company tours all over the world. And so we have so many different audiences we perform for. And so we also have many different audiences in the education programs that we have. We have a vast network of programs, not only here in New York City, but also in the West Coast, in the Midwest, and in Miami as well. And those programs really help us intersect with other communities and audiences. So it's a very wide net that's cast both through performances and our education. And then let me just add that right here in New York City, we have a beautiful school of dance for children who are interested and finding themselves in this art form. And we serve about 1,000 students with our training programs. And then in the schools, we have public school programs, and we serve over 19,000 children a year.
How young, at what age do you start with the students?
At the school, we start as early as 2 years old. We have,
oh, wow.
We have introductory lessons where a parent can come with their child and participate and explore and let them see the beauty of movement and, of course, our wonderful culture.
So I'd like to get to some of the programming that's on tap, but before I do that, I would like to know a little more about you. Tell me about how you became involved in dance, and about your trajectory.
Oh my goodness! My family and I immigrated to the United States from Cuba in 1969, and the music we brought at that time was the thing that connected me most to my culture back home as I was, assimilating into my adopted homeland. And, that music really resonated with me, and the movement also. So, you're a Cuban, you start listening to the music, you start dancing. So dance has always been a part of who I am. And we immigrated and settled in the Bronx, and it was in grammar school, 8th grade, I had the opportunity of having a teacher who was also an actor in the city, and we put together You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, and I won the role of Linus, and Linus has to dance with a blanket, and that's it. I was hooked. I mean, the performance, the movement, the dancing, everything came together for me, and from then on, I had the performance bug. So...
Oh, yeah. I'm going back to, Charlie Brown. I remember Linus also was sucking his thumb the whole time, if I remember correctly. You're taking me back to my early years. I used to read that cartoon every weekend in the Sunday Bergen Record.
Yeah, they were great. And, of course, I was enamored of them as well as a child, learning about this great country.
So I was going to, I want to make sure I give you enough time. We got about 7 minutes left. I'd like to just get a sense of what you have in store this spring. What's on tap? What can audiences discover?
So since I've been the artistic director of Ballet Hispanico, I've had the unique opportunity to take the vision and kind of broaden it and curate programs that really show the deep diversity of our Hispanic diaspora. So this year we're at the Joy Theater, which starts March 26th and goes through the 31st. We are presenting a unique program that shows the intersection of the Hispanic diaspora and the Asian diaspora. Many people don't know that exists, and I'm always interested in doing that, in unearthing the interesting ways cultures intersect and make us who we are. And so we're showing a program of 2 new works, one by Edward Liang, who is a choreographer, ex-New York City ballet dancer, who is interested in looking at the whole idea of immigration and migration in his Asian community to Cuba, because I myself am part Chinese of Cuban descent. And so he has a beautiful work that really resonates with that. And then we have Benny Royce Royon, who is a Filipino-American choreographer. And in the Philippines, as you know, had Spanish rule for over 300 years. And so there are a lot of connective tissue in his culture between Spanish and Asian as well. So those are 2 beautiful works that really touch upon culture in a very innovative way.
Given the political climate in our country, how has this affected your programming?
Oh, well, I'm with our art and with our programming, I am raising that standard of diversity and inclusion. I think this political climate gives us the opportunity to have a louder voice and be at the table and demonstrate how important it is to have a diverse world, demonstrate how we all come from so many different places that, there is no true culture that's above any other culture. So I think we have a wonderful opportunity here, and we're doing everything possible to be a voice that really proclaims the importance of diversity.
So Martha Graham had once said that dance is the hidden language of the soul of the body. What does dance mean to you?
Wow, that I don't know if I can follow up Martha Graham. You know, I was a student at Martha Graham, so I'm very much enamored of anything she says. For me, dance is, I agree, it is a language. It is a language of the soul because it encompasses this body, this palate that can do so much physically, and that we understand each other better by gesture and movement, sometimes if we allow it, sometimes then by language, by actual speech. And so for me, dance is that conduit to understanding and cultural dialogue.
So we talked a little about what is coming up at the Joyce Theater, and I work with a cultural venue in Queens, and I know that they're already planning out their summer programming. You just announced some of your summer programming as well. Tell me a little about that.
Well, we have a wonderful summer education programs. We have a session that is called Choreo Lab, where we give the opportunity to young dancers to experience what it is to be in a company. So we invite choreographers of note come in and work with them, and we have a whole schedule that is based on, well, it's a replica of what the professional dancers do every day at Ballet Hispanico. That's an interesting 2-week session. And then we have a month-long session, which is our summer intensive, where even younger, this is for a much younger audience, younger students can come in and learn everything about Ballet Hispanico and how we fuse different genres of dance in order to train a more eclectic dancer.
Wow. So tell me a little more just about the educational classes when you're starting with kids as young as 2. I mean, really to help foster this love of dance in them. What is it like, watching these youngsters, where their eyes open up to this possibility?
Oh, Jim, I can't tell you that it makes me get up every day when I walk in through those halls and see those eyes open and smiling, and the happiness that, and the finding themselves in that classroom and allowing themselves to grow as people. Because I like to say that we just don't train dancers or people to be professional dancers. We train people to be better human beings because they are exposed to the art. And in that exposure, you find multiple perspectives, and you find yourself being able to navigate our world in such a better way.
So, Eduardo Beato, can you just, as we wrap up, tell our listeners a little about how they can find out more about Ballet Hispanico?
Absolutely. You can find out more about Ballet Hispanico at our website, www.ballethispanico.org, and there you can also find a way to the Joyce website that has tickets for our performances coming up in March 26th through the 31st. It is going to be a spectacular performance, so I really hope you can all join us.
Eduardo Beato, thank you so much for joining me here on WBAI City Watch.
Oh, Jim, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Have a great day. So you have been listening to City Watch here on WBAI New York 99.5 FM and streaming live at WBAI.org. In a few moments, we'll bring up our next guest. But I just want to remind our listeners that I also am on Thursdays on another show with the wonderful Celeste Katz called Driving Forces, and where we focus on politics and policy. That's 5 to 6 every Thursday night. And we are focusing on the Queens District Attorney's race, which we did this past Thursday and will again this coming Thursday, and invite listeners to call in during the show to talk about what you feel are the issues that the DA candidate should be discussing leading up to the June 25th primary. And that number to call at that point is 212-209-2877. So today we've been talking about culture in New York. And I talked a little before about the Department of Cultural Affairs. We did try to have the commissioner on today as well, but unfortunately he was not available. I mentioned before about the Create NYC Cultural Plan. And in that public engagement process, apparently there were thousands of New Yorkers who weighed in on the value of culture and the arts and rated their priorities. And when they rated them, 97, almost 100%, 97 of those who responded said the arts and culture are important to the overall quality of life in the city. Curious how you feel about that. And 84% said it's very important. And then a little above that, 92% said art and culture are important in their lives. And that's what you find when you find a lot of these opportunities across our 5 boroughs. So that brings me to our next guest, one of the cultural leaders in Queens, Taryn Sacramone, who is executive director at Queens Theater, where she's been since 2013. She previously was the executive director of the Astoria Performing Arts Center, and she currently serves as the Queens Vice Chair of the city's Cultural Institutions Group, what are known as the CIGs, and on the board of directors of the NYC and Company Foundation. Taryn, welcome to City Watch.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for having me on.
So I just mentioned that you're vice chair of the CIGs. Just for our listeners, can you talk a little about what this group is and what they do?
Yeah, sure. The Cultural Institutions Group is comprised of 33 cultural organizations that are on New York City property and receive some operations support and capital funding from the city. And all of the CIGs work to make culture as accessible as possible for all New Yorkers. And that goes beyond free or low-cost admissions, although we tend to have that. But education programming is an example. So there are members across all 5 boroughs, performing arts centers, zoos, museums, gardens. A lot of people may not have heard of the term Cultural Institutions Group, but you know the members. Some are big institutions, others are smaller. So from the Metropolitan Museum of Art to the Jamaica Center for Arts and Learning, Public Theater, New York Hall of Science, and more. There are 8 of us in Queens. So it's a really unique partnership. Other cities don't have something like this. And New York's commitment to culture, especially over time, is something to be really proud of. The Cultural Institutions Group is 150 years old. The first, I think, was the American Museum of Natural History.
Okay, so we know Queens Theater isn't 150 years old. How old is Queens Theater? Just tell me a little about its history.
Well, we are celebrating our 30th anniversary this season. Our building is older than that. Our building was built for the 64-65 World Fair, part of the New York State Pavilion. It was the piece called the Theaterama. And then it had a couple of different chapters, and it became the Queens Theater with support from the then borough president, Claire Shulman, in 1989.
And what type of programming do you offer, and who's your core audience?
So we have three theater spaces. We have a variety of programming. We have 3 theater spaces. We have a 472-seat main stage, a cabaret space, and a black box theater. And it enables us to do a real variety of work. So we produce and develop new works of theater. We present theater productions. We present dance companies, working with international and local artists. We have a family series for children, and we also present special events throughout the year. I'm at the theater right now, and it's kind of a typical weekend at Queens Theater. We have a company called Chicken Shed, which is an inclusive children's theater that started in the UK in our cabaret space, doing a performance for babies up till the age of 6 with puppets and songs and a really environmentally staged intimate show. And then on our main stage, we have Koresh Dance Company, a contemporary company from Philadelphia, led by an Israeli choreographer, and they're getting ready to do a show. So it's great to have this variety of things, and I think it's really appropriate considering the diversity of the community that we serve.
So, in talking about the diversity of the community, I recall talking with you last year about a program you were launching called Theater for All. Can you tell our listeners a little about that? What prompted you to create this and what it does?
So, Queens Theater was founded, with a mission of diversity, and being in a borough as culturally diverse as Queens is, we'd always thought about the cultural diversity, but a couple of years ago, I started to really consider whether we were doing enough to include people with disabilities as either artists or students or audience members. What were the barriers that we might have to the inclusion of people with disabilities? So I actively sought to work with more artists with disabilities and hear their perspective on their experience in the performing arts, and put together an advisory committee of people who I could learn from in this area. And we launched Theater for All as one big initiative to advance the inclusion of people with disabilities in the performing arts. And there are multiple parts to it. So we did increase accessibility services at the theater. So we now offer audio description. We have 2 in-house audio describers on staff now. We offer ASL interpretation on a regular schedule, open captioning, Braille playbills, large print playbills. We wanted to make it so that any community member who wanted to come and enjoy a performance would be able to have the same experience as any other community member. We also, at the same time, launched a middle school program, which was very intentionally inclusive of children with disabilities. Councilmember Moya actually supported the pilot of that program. We worked in a middle school in Corona to do that, and the teaching artists themselves have disabilities because representation we knew is very important there. We had reached out to a database of disabled performers asking about the training opportunities that they had had as children while we were developing that middle school program. I wanted to know what barriers had existed, what they would have liked to have had as children. And one of the bits of feedback that we got was, yes, training at a younger age would have been great, but we need professional training and networking opportunities now, because the industry is not inclusive of artists with disabilities, and our opportunities are limited, and we need more opportunities for that. So,
and you also got, with the program that you launched that took place, I think it was September, how did you get actor Vincent D'Onofrio involved?
Yeah, that's right. So one of the outcomes, right, we did this professional training program for early career actors with disabilities, and I had met Vincent a couple of times. He'd been to the theater, and when we were putting together our team of instructors, we were really looking for accomplished professionals themselves, people who could really help our students navigate the industry, and also just really, really great teachers for the skill building we hope people will get out of it. So I thought of Vincent immediately because, he's an incredible actor. And he's also been teaching method acting for 15 years. And teaching is really, really important to him. So he was quick to sign on to the program. He was excited about the idea.
So we've got just about 2 to 3 minutes left, and I really want to give you a chance to talk about what programs or presentations are on the horizon.
Oh, my gosh. We have a very busy spring ahead. So I'll just tell you a couple of things. We have Capuli Mexican Dance Company coming in April 13th and 14th. They're going to be premiering a new show about Cinco Demayo on our main stage. Capuli does really excellent work. If people aren't familiar with them, it's a Queens-based Mexican dance company. They've performed here many times over the past 15 years. And Cinco de Mayo is a big event, actually, in Flushing Meadows, Corona Park. Over 100,000 people come to the park where we are to celebrate Cinco de Mayo each year. So when I learned that Capuli was developing a new show about Cinco de Mayo, I jumped at the opportunity to premiere it. They're just great storytellers, and their shows are amazing.
And you also have, I know each year, is it the Latin Dance Fiesta?
Yeah, that's always fun. It's just like a celebration. We usually feature 4 different dance companies. It's curated by our front of house manager, William Mosquera, who's also an artist himself and a musician himself, and he connects with local folkloric companies and puts together an amazing show. And this is our 4th annual Latin Dance Fiesta. In the first year, I remember as I pulled up to the theater to come to the show, I saw a limousine pulling up to the theater to come to the show. It's like audience members came out of the limousine, and they were just super excited to see the show. And I thought, yeah, this is going to be an annual event.
So, Taryn, we've got just about a minute left. How can people learn more about Queens Theater?
Well, I would love for people to learn more. They can go to www.queenstheater.org. We have everything on our calendar there. They can join our mailing list. We have really a variety. I mean, our goal is to reach everybody. So hopefully people can find programming that speaks to them.
Terrence Ackerman, Executive Director at Queens Theater. Thank you for joining me, Jeff Simmons, here on City Watch today.
Thank you.
So we are now up to our final guest. I'm heading back to Manhattan for Queens right now to speak with Martin Kagan, who's the Assistant Vice President of Cultural Affairs at Pace University. He joins us today to talk about programming at the Chimel Center for the Arts, which is just a beautiful space at the Lower Manhattan campus. Welcome to City Watch.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Welcome.
Jeff. Yes, welcome, and happy St. Patrick's Day to you.
Same to you. Now, Martin, I met you a few years ago when I worked with the Downtown Alliance, and we had done some programming together. So while I might be familiar with Chimel Center, can you tell our listeners a little about it?
Sure. The Chimel Center is a 650-seat theater that's located on Spruce Street, right by the Brooklyn Bridge, as part of the Pace University downtown campus. It's a wonderful center. It's a very intimate space, and you feel intimate both from the orchestra and from the balcony. And we have had a full season, and we're still in the midst of our full season of programming for 2018-2019, including a lot of dance, comedy, music, and as we had talked about, we're ready to enter a week where we're going to combine all three of them.
Well, we're going to come to that in just a moment, because I'm really curious, in your time with Pace University, how has the programming changed, over time? What do audiences want to experience now when they come to see a show or any type of presentation?
Well, we draw audiences for all of our different events. And the one thing that is the most important part is that we have made our programming accessible from a financial point of view. And so whether it's kids programming, we did a sing-along Mary Poppins, and a family show with the circus, the Shanghai Circus, or even these three upcoming events that we have. All of our tickets are regularly priced, and you can bring your girlfriend, you can bring your kids, and it won't take a huge drain out of your wallet.
So a few moments ago, you did mention you have a busy week ahead. Tell me a little about what's on the horizon this week, because I did search your website, and I wanted to ask about one of the presentations.
Right. We have three events coming up, Jeff. On Friday night, we have Sylvain Amard, who is this incredible dancer from Montreal. And at 62, he was asked to commission a piece for himself. So he thought about it. He hadn't been on the stage in many years. And he has come back to do this work on Friday night. And for many people who might be familiar with the Grand Continental that happened a number of years ago in Lower Manhattan, with 250 dancers in the Seaport, Sylvain Amard was the choreographer of that. And now he's coming back to do a solo work. And that's on Friday night at 7:30. On Saturday night at 7:30, we're going to be presenting Yakov Smirnoff, the wonderful comic, who hasn't been in New York in many, many years.
The Russian comedian.
Yes.
So I guess then, do we expect this to get somewhat political, given, the White House's alleged, I made air quotes there, alleged Russian connections?
Well, he's had a show running in Branson, Missouri for many, many years. And so I can't believe that it's going to be that political. and then we end the weekend with, for those people who want to carry over St. Patrick's Day, we are bringing this incredible group from Ireland called We Banjo 3. It's 4 musicians, and they do a spectacular job of traditional Irish music. and that's at Sunday at 7:32. So it highlights, the breadth of all of the work that the Chimel Center tries to present. As you know, Lower Manhattan has one of the largest growing residential populations. And so we try to do things that not only are exciting to our new residents in Lower Manhattan, but also bring out people from all parts of Manhattan and from the 5 boroughs. The Chimel Center is, once people come, they realize how easy it is. It's on the A, C, 4, 5, 6, 2, and 3 trains. And so it's pretty accessible to everybody.
I mean, essentially, for context for listeners, it is, you basically can hold your breath from City Hall in Lower Manhattan and walk down the street there.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
or if you want to walk across the Brooklyn Bridge, you can very easily find us from there. Very
good point. I've done that a number of times. So, tell me a little about your background. What brought you to Pace, and a little about your artistic background.
Well, I've had a unique over 30 years experience in arts administration, and I've run everything from dance companies to performing arts presenters. I was the executive of Opera America, which is the service organization of all the professional opera companies in Washington, D.C. for 10 years. So I bring a breadth of knowledge of the arts and artists working in those. And I try to keep up with all of the current activities that are happening in all of the disciplines.
And, looking at your bio, I also noted that you teach a course called Managing Creativity. Can you talk about that?
Yes. The Lubin School of Business has an arts and entertainment management program. And I teach a course in Managing Creativity. And what I'm doing is I'm awakening the students at the beginning to the theory behind creativity, which is the idea of bringing 2 distinct ideas together to create a new one. And the creative process, as defined by many theorists, and there are many different approaches to the creative process. And so I go through the first couple classes with kind of awakening that everybody is creative in different ways, and that when you understand how you are creative, it will help you in the future. I also then, we have a couple projects that the students do, but I bring in a speaker every week to talk about how they manage creative talent. So I've had Ken Waisman, who is the original Broadway producer of Grease and Agnes of God. I've had a Paul Kernett and Steve Lance, who are advertising executives and creative people. I bring in Patrick Willingham, who is the executive director of the Public Theater. So they get a sense, and Paul Gazzone, who's a musician, to get a sense of how each of them deal in their own way with creative talent. So and become effective at it.
And it's interesting as you're talking about this, I recall someone that I had worked with a while ago saying that she needed more time to be creative. She wanted to, she just needed that space to be creative. Where does your creativity come from?
Well, I think a lot, and I daydream a lot. And I look at things, I try to look at things differently. And I also try to look at ways of making things happen, because an idea that doesn't have a fulfillment at the other end is just an idea. And so it's looking at ways of, particularly when I put a season together, of how do things match? How does this become a complete season with lots of different activities in it that somebody can come to? And one of the things that we're learning over the years is that I will attract somebody for a dance performance or for a musical event, who will then come back 2 weeks later and try something different that they probably wouldn't have thought about. Or come see a comedian. And I think that's the essence of what I try to do.
And that's a very good point, because, I've worked with Flushing Town Hall for a number of years. And what I find is that a number of the people who come there, often because of a performance, because they have heard of the performer or a specific interest, then discover I see them repeatedly come back at other performances because they're opening up their minds. There's things that they'd never considered before. As we've got about a minute to 2 minutes left. Any other events on the horizon you'd like to talk about? And then
yes. One very brief one. In May 10th and 11th, we are doing what is called a Crossing Bridges Music Fest, which is singer-songwriters. It's 4 musicians on each of the programs on Friday night and 4 musicians on Saturday night with a singer-songwriter circle on Saturday afternoon. I think it is going to be a wonderful event. And there's people like Paula Cole, John Colton, the Kennedys. I mean, it is a vast array of artists. Vance Gilbert, Adam Ezra Band, Don Flemons, Abby Gardner. So it's going to Janie Barnett. So it's going to be a wonderful 2 evenings of Americana music from different genres, and they're all singer-songwriters with a singer-songwriter circle in between.
And Martin, how can people learn more about the Chimel Center for the Arts and your programming?
Well, the best one of the best ways is going to our website, which is chimelcenter.org, and if I can spell that, it's SCHIMMELCENTER.org, which has all of our upcoming events. Or they can order tickets from Ovation Tix, and that number is 866-811-4111.
Martin Kagan, Assistant Vice President of Cultural Affairs at Pace University. Thank you so much for joining me, Jeff Simmons, here on City Watch today.
Thank you, Jeff, and have a wonderful St. Patrick's Day.
Thank you. You too. So as we come to a close in a few moments, I just want to also end on one quote, since we've been talking about culture and the arts in New York City. It was from Thomas Kincaid, an American painter of popular, realistic, and pastoral subjects. His quote was, "Art transcends cultural boundaries." So as we think about New York City and all of the cultural opportunities and artistic opportunities that you have, it's always wonderful to discover something new and fresh and different around the corner. Another edition of City Watch is coming to a close. I would like to thank our guests today. First up was New York City Council member Francisco Moya, and then we were joined by Eduardo Beato of Ballet Hispanico, and then Queens Theater's Terrence Sacramone, ending with Martin Kagan of Pace University. I also would like to thank our amazing engineer, Sean Rhodes, who's always wonderful with me. And especially thanks to you, our listeners, for supporting the show. We're simply unable to do any of this without your generosity. Remember, if you missed any part of the show today, or you just want to listen to it again, the MP3 download will be available at www.wbai.org. You just have to click on Archives and then City Watch. The show will be up and ready and online in about 10 minutes and stay up for 90 days. Have a great day.